Good morning and welcome to the World Wide Well. It's time for a poolside chat. We're looking at Daniel chapter 5, and I'd like to kind of help you understand the context a little bit. The context is everything when you look at certain parts of the Bible. There was a great kingdom sort of centered around Jerusalem with Saul, David, Solomon, and their descendants, and that lasted for several hundred years. At the end of that time, the Mesopotamians, the people from modern day Iraq, the Tigris and the Euphrates, one of the great superpowers of the time, invaded. Now, there were three different empires that fought over that piece of real estate, Mesopotamia. That was the Assyrians in Nineveh, that was the Babylonians in Babylon, and that was the Persians and the Medes up in the hill country in Persia. And they all fought over this area for centuries, and kind of still are, for that matter. And the Assyrians knocked off the northern kingdom of Israel. The Babylonians knocked off the southern kingdom, and then the Persians took over. So you have the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and the Persians in rather short order. The one in the middle, think of a sandwich, with the Assyrians being one piece of bread, the Persians being another one, and the Babylonians being a piece of bologna in between. The Babylonian Empire only lasted about as long as a human lifespan, kind of like the Soviet Union in the last century, from 1917 to 1989, 90, 91, in that era, right in there. And this was a very short-lived empire, but a very powerful one. And Nebuchadnezzar was the emperor. And his son, Belshazzar, was having a party. And they decided that they were going to use the gold cups and implements from the temple, which they had destroyed. Well, that doesn't sit too well with the Lord, of course. And Daniel was part of the intelligentsia. He was a really smart Jewish guy, and he had been used as an advisor many times in the past. And he was sort of in retirement at the time. And while this party was going on, they were drinking out of the golden cups and all that. A hand appeared and wrote on the wall, MENE, MENE, TEKEL, UPHARSIN. That kind of freaked out the emperor, and he asked around saying, hey, who can interpret this for me? Whoever can interpret it, I will give them a third of the kingdom. Sounds like one of those fairy tales from the Middle Ages with knights and kings and all that kind of stuff. Well, he says, I can do that, and nobody could interpret it, which is kind of strange, but nobody could interpret it. And what happened then is that they called for Daniel. The queen said, hey, there's this guy named Daniel who's really smart, and he can take care of this. And so basically, Daniel shows up kind of reluctantly, and he interprets it, saying, hey, the kingdom is going to be taken away from you and given to the Persians. And that's exactly what happened. Belshazzar died. Darius the Mede took over, and that was that. So basically, the moral of the story is don't mess with God's stuff. There are certain things which just are sacred, and there are certain things that are taboo, certain things that shouldn't be messed with, certain things that stand for things that are big. It's not that the cups were that important, it's what they stand for. And it's not like a cross on top of a church is any different kind of wood than any other kind of wood. But the truth is, it's what it stands for. The American flag is just a flag. It's just cloth, colored cloth, but it's what it stands for. And there are certain things which I think are very, very important. Family, marriage, reverence for God, and those kinds of things. One nation under God. And I think it's really important that we not completely secularize as a society. And what I mean by that is freedom of religion doesn't mean a completely sanitized from religion society. And the founding fathers understood this, and the founding fathers believed that a generic Judeo-Christian reverence for providence was more inclusive than a secular state like they were putting together in France at the time, which failed, or a state religion like England with the Church of England. So the founding fathers basically chose for a vague sense of providence, in God we trust type of thing. And George Washington often talked about providence, days of fasting and prayer for the country, all the way through Lincoln's time, and other times were quite common. But no one faith system was pushed, just sort of a generic higher power. And if you've ever been in a 12-step group, you know that you can't do a 12-step group without a higher power. It doesn't work. And the country doesn't work without one either. And I really believe that we're sort of in a timeout right now as a country, or as a world for that matter. And I think it's important that we reverence a higher power, that we acknowledge that there's something bigger than humankind, something bigger than the puny brain inside of a person, something bigger than the ideas that we have, something bigger than the votes of the majority, because the votes of the majority can be wrong. Hitler got elected, for goodness sake. So we definitely want to recover that reverence. And that's what this story is about. This king, uh, Belshazzar, wasn't reverencing God as his father learned how to do. His father learned the hard way to reverence God, the creator, providence. And in learning to do that, he held on to the kingdom, whereas Belshazzar lost the kingdom. And I'm not here to push religion on anyone. I'm not here to push my theology on anyone. There's lots of different theologies, lots of different denominations in our country. But a generic sense of God as providence and higher power is essential for this country to work. In fact, Thomas Jefferson understood that well. In the Declaration of Independence, he said that we are endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And he was urged to get rid of the word creator, and he didn't do it because he said that if we get our rights from anyone but the highest authority, they can be taken away. If we get our rights from the majority or from people or from votes or from anything else, or from the government can take them away. But if we get them from God, if we are endowed with them and they are inalienable, we can't get rid of them. They're there. They're part of who we are. Then they are there eternally. And so here's a plea for reinstating our sense of reverence for a higher power, for a God who is above us. And I really believe that that's going to help bring us out of the challenge we're in right now. So let's pray for that together, and let's encourage others to heed that wisdom. Otherwise, we might just see some writing on the wall.